Hit the button. All right, it says we're live. Take them
That's
for
for
their
life.
word. This feels too claustrophobic. That feels a
Sure.
little better. What's up, Evan? How you doing?
I'm doing good, man. Um, yeah, it's finally December. This is when things get to kind of calm down a little bit and feels good.
Yeah. Are you on break now?
Technically, yeah. Not from like doing stuff, but I'm on break from work. I have a full week off now, which is funny because also we'll have the Christmas holidays coming up, but I had enough holidays that I hadn't used. I needed to use them somehow.
Gotcha. Cool. What are you doing with your time off here?
Well, generally this year I've been focused on, self-care, going to the gym. This is more time going out for walks and hanging out with the family. But I also am working on my side project, working on Dungeon Mastery, and a complete reworking of uh, how it works and how the data is structured, and switching from Firebase to Supabase and all that stuff. And
I like to
it's
hear
come,
that.
it's coming along quite well.
Yeah.
Um, Overall, but it's also been a challenge. And so yeah, that's the other thing I plan to spend a lot of time on during my break.
Yeah. That's cool. Do you want to show Dungeon Mastery just to show like what it is, where you're
Yeah,
at with
sure.
it? Because I really love your project here. Love to show that off.
Sure.
Let me throw
Um,
on Twitter here too while you're pulling that up.
right.
Just let people know where we're at. Sweet.
Cool. All right, I'll share my screen.
There we go. Let's get it up.
There we go.
The
Okay,
recursion.
the recursion. Yeah, it's true. Okay, so basically, the app itself is a note-taking application for tabletop role-playing games like Dungeons and Dragons. And um, the core part of the functionality is a kind of Roam research level linked notes, where you can type what you want, and uh, in your session notes, you would be in the middle of playing a game, a campaign that you've set up, and on this date you played, and some stuff happened. And when you take your notes, you can link to whatever those records are. So in my case, I mentioned the character Moish. He's one of our players. I can link to Moish as I'm typing my notes, and then if I want to quickly, when I'm looking through notes later, go and look at the details of him, I can click on that. It pops up his details along with, potentially private notes or things about his character that are staying put for a long period of time, who he's interacted with, these sorts of things. So Moish in this case has been previously mentioned in the records for this NPC, Baldaman. I can click through to him and
Mm.
remember the details of him because we honestly haven't seen him in real time in like 2.5, 3 years because we've been playing for so long. So I wouldn't remember unless I had these kind of notes at hand. But then finding these notes when you have hundreds and hundreds of locations and NPCs and things like that can get pretty overwhelming.
Yeah.
Um, also, if I look at the stats for our particular game, look, we've been playing for 3.5 years. We have 143 individual sessions we've played. We've played for almost 300 hours at this stage. Finding the details, remembering all of that stuff is impossible. And when I had notes that were in one of my other note-taking apps, it was just hard to find stuff in there as well. You can search, yeah, but then bouncing around quickly. And in the heat of like, you're describing the location they're walking through, you have to make up a name. You could see like I had to make up a name on the spot the other night. And
Yeah.
technically this it doesn't exist yet, but now he does. He's an NPC. Um, and I'll create him and just remind myself this was the werewolf guardian of the bridge,
Yeah.
in
Of
uh,
course.
Philophis's uh, grandfather's realm. You know, that's enough for me for now. But if I don't do that, what's the point of this tool? Anyway, I've been building that for quite a long time,
Yeah.
and it's great. But then I don't know. The primary driving force of version 2.0 was I realized in terms of data structure, all of these players, locations, NPCs, all those record types, and the notes were tied to this single campaign. So we have this outer wrapper of the campaign, and
Yeah.
everything is inside there.
So
And
this
that's,
is like
yeah,
if we're so you're in Firebase currently. So the
yeah,
idea here is almost there's a document for the campaign, and then we have more documents nested inside of that campaign. Is that?
yeah. I mean, on a really simple level, we have like the campaigns themselves, which
Oh, I
have
see.
very little data. And the way that I did it at first was, let's say the NPCs, each of those have a reference to their campaign.
Gotcha.
So in a NoSQL
Okay.
database setup, you're not doing like joins and all that sort of stuff. You just toss, you can put whatever fields you want. There's no normalization here. It's kind of a mess, but it
Yeah.
works. It's fine. And I didn't
Yeah.
need
But this
more
is
than
this
this.
is better than what I had thought, which was that
Yeah.
NPCs were actually nested inside of the campaign
No, I read
element.
somewhere that that was something that is encouraged, and I was like, I don't want to do that. I like
Yeah.
flat structure.
Yeah.
Um,
The more
but
normalized this way.
yeah, but apparently you can do that, and they
Yeah.
don't care. You just do it and whatever. I didn't like that. So already I had a bit of like, this isn't necessarily the best approach, but it worked, and it's
Yeah.
worked for a couple of years. The thing I hit was all of these are they belong, including the players, belong to this campaign. But
Hmm.
we're going to finish this campaign at some stage, right? They're already level 17. Soon enough, they'll be level 20. And you generally, it's not fun anymore once you get to that level of a player because you're just kind of like godly powers. You can solve anything, any crisis ahead of you.
Right.
Um, so we'll finish the campaign. They'll save the world, or they won't. We'll find out. But then we'll start a new campaign.
But
And
you'll
my
use the
thing
same
is,
characters, right?
that's the
I'm
thing.
not
Well,
I'm not as big on Dungeons and Dragons.
yeah, so we won't be the same people. The players might not be the same, but the locations will be.
I
I
see. Okay.
they don't have to be, but I want them to be. I guess that would be the exciting thing for me is like, okay, we move the timeline
Yeah.
forward after this 30 years, 50 years, etc. But the world that they inhabited over this campaign has changed, and it would be great to be able to have their new characters experience like, oh, look, you go to this city and there's a statue to this character that you played in the last game, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Because they became so famous.
It's like
Or
you're
even
building up the lore,
potentially,
and then
yeah,
you want to
exactly.
keep that with you, even though. So you want to take the context of the lore with you. Oh, sorry, but
Yeah,
you want to like make an alternate storyline through that world.
exactly. And
Yeah.
so how you can't do that with the current structure, the data structure, because if I create a new campaign here, let's do the blank slate one, there are no locations here. And if I want to take one of those from the other campaign, I kind
Mm.
of just have to copy and paste. And what a waste of time that would be.
Yeah.
So then I went down and it took me a month because this is a side project. It took me months just to be like, okay, how do I restructure this data to in an efficient way that I can implement? And I was like, I don't think Firestore is right for this anymore. This sounds a lot more like I need a proper like database that I could control and set up tables and learn the back end and do joins and all
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
kind of stuff.
So you wanted to go to
Um,
something more relational, less.
yeah, it felt like that was what I wanted.
Mhm.
Especially the as I started looking at what was required of the data structures, there's a lot more data flying around and a lot more stuff that needs to be kind of pieced together on the fly. And just doing a call to get 1,000 records and then parsing those started to feel really not great. So I was already going to have to deal with cloud functions to parse some of this data before getting it to the front end. And yeah, it just, I don't know. And at the same
Yeah.
time, I also am a front ender, so I like new shiny things. So I started looking into Superbase.
Yeah. We're
Um,
we're helpless JavaScript front end
yeah,
developers are so easily
definitely.
distracted by the new thing. But
So,
oh, so
so
here's Supabase.
yeah, here's Superbase, and this is what I'm working on now. So you'll see a lot more tables here
Uh
because
huh.
I have a lot more relations now. The biggest change has been that I need to have a different concept of what a user is because I'm also adapting to support more professional usage of this in the
Mm.
future. And those kind of people, there might be like someone that runs the professional DM like business, but they have employees that are the DMs themselves. You also sometimes have people that want to do co-DMing, so
Wait,
it'd be nice.
that's a
Yeah,
thing?
that's totally a
Okay.
thing. It's
I
amazing.
kind of expected there to maybe be some people who would be like, "Hey, I'll DM a session, I'll DM a
Yeah.
campaign for you." I didn't expect for a company to go out and recruit those people so to put them together in a service, but I guess
Yeah.
it makes sense. It's
Yeah,
kind
for
of like
sure.
the Uber of
A little bit,
of
yeah.
DMs.
Yeah. Yeah, someone has had that sort of like Airbnb, but for DMing.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Someone's
for sure.
ugh.
Because you need quality control, you need vetting, and as you do DMing, you get good at these things. Like some of these people are just really good storytellers. They know how
Mm.
to take care. Like it is a valid service that you can pay someone for because you
Yeah,
need
absolutely.
expertise in it. So I wanted to support them too. So I ended up having like an organization is the primary account, similar to how actually Supabase does it. You have an org when you sign into Supabase, and then you have users inside that org that can be admins, but they
Hmm.
have the admin role. They are not the organization, so they're not one
Yeah.
and the same.
Do you
And
have
yeah, go ahead.
sorry, do you have like the concept here too? Like say, well, I don't know, say there's like one of these companies that I guess has like the fleet of DMs ready to go.
Mm.
But they also have some sort of I don't know, maybe say there's organization B and they want to like work together a little bit, so they want to share some of the worlds that they've built together, like
Yeah.
as they do this stuff. Is it possible to share across orgs at that?
I think we might add that in eventually when we get to the template stage. But
Yeah.
the idea is once you've added, let's say, once you've started a campaign or you've created some of these records,
Mm-hmm.
they need to exist only within a certain scope.
Okay.
So what I've done is I've had a concept of a universe, and the idea is your
Okay.
organization controls the metaverse. So in this universe, you've got Spider-Man, Tobey Maguire, but in the other one, you have Andrew Garfield Spider-Man, and the records in there. There is a NPC for Spider-Man in both universes, but they're not the same record, and they have different text in them because they're different universes. So in my home game campaign, I'm going to keep everything within the same universe. I will just
I
have additional
see.
campaigns. But the thing is, like, okay, a great example within D&D is there's a lot of modules. So they have stories like the Curse of Strahd, a very like Barovian vampire type vibe, where you go and you can spend as long as you need to, but the goal of it is to eventually storm the castle and take out the evil
Okay.
vampire
So
Count Strahd.
that's kind of like a pre-scripted
Yeah, so everything's
campaign.
pre set up. You can have your characters, kind of the maps, like it's a whole book that they published with
Okay.
all of the details you might need. And you can spin off as the players engage with the world. You'll meet characters that you didn't expect that aren't in the book.
Hmm.
Um,
Okay.
those will change their attitudes towards the players and so on. So you need to track what's happened, but you share the same starting point. So a professional GM might run that Curse of Strahd campaign for 6 different groups, potentially all at the same time.
Right.
So they definitely need this sort of like, I need what happened
Hmm.
and how it changed from the original
Yeah.
to be different. Like, so they need these universe containers.
Yeah.
Um, so I had that, and then I had, the records inside that are now siblings to campaigns so that they can be shared amongst multiple campaigns. It just changed the whole structure. And it really was just like, well, Firebase is not going to work for me for the, I'm sure I could have made it work.
Yeah.
Um,
So you
but
it could yeah, of course it I think
yeah,
it definitely could have,
yeah.
right? But you wanted to go relational, I guess, to make sure that those there were uh I guess functionality in there to be able to join between the different relations to say
Yeah.
five
And
campaigns together.
I'm personally like a super big user of TypeScript, and I really
Mm.
was getting tired of having so much magic happening on the database side.
Yeah.
And not having a clear understanding or anywhere you can encode of what is actually my database collection structure, unless I'm hard coding it, it just felt a little icky. And so what I liked about Supabase or any of these is that I can have a initial sort of like setup script. So it's in my code base, in my Git control,
Yeah.
my Git history that allows me to set the tables and set up the fields that are available on that. At least that's here. And then on top of that, you've got the ability to export, um, you know, at any given time, what the current status of that is,
Yeah.
et cetera, and pull that out. Like that, having that source of truth in your code base. And yes, okay, there's a code gen there, but it's still the initial creation of the code that then creates the code gen is there in your code base too. I love that. That's been super nice for me.
It's been super nice. Nice.
Need the sound effect for that.
Nah. I know it is a soundboard. Whenever we do a dad pun, we can just drop that in.
Yeah,
But yeah, so this
yeah.
is all. So this is just generated entirely, or did you have to come in and adjust anything
Uh,
afterwards?
no, I literally just hit save every now and then if I remember to format it correctly so I can read it and it's the correct indentation and all. But
Gotcha.
no, it's generated. What I did do, let's see. So I have a script here, which is what in my, oh boy, it's been a few days. Where did I put it? I think it's in here. I run a script. Yeah, where is this? Mastery DB. Why am I not seeing it? Source lib. Oh, because it's up above there. Okay. So I have these scripts borrowed from you, by the way, to generate types, which just runs the kind of local stuff using the environment variables.
Oh yeah. Okay.
Um, for now, like I just did a quick, as you did, I did a quick and dirty inquirer to select local or staging. I'm not using staging yet for the time being. Everything's being developed locally, but I use that command, superbase gen
Oh, I see.
TypeScripts local.
So this was
And
from the. Where did I do this? Um,
this was like in your initial um, Narwhal
yeah.
demonstration
Actually,
stuff.
I don't use that anymore. Like I didn't use that in the course.
Yeah.
I suppose we could have, but yeah, we didn't use NX in the course.
Yeah, yeah,
Just because we
that's
wanted
fine.
to pull out a few more abstractions. But
Sure. I'm all in on NX, and so I've been
yeah,
whenever
same.
possible doing this sort of stuff for myself. I mean, there's a little
Yeah,
bit of hard coding here, right? Like getting the folder to place it into, yeah, that's
yeah,
a little, it is what it is. But regardless, that works. I run that. There's a command here in, I guess I can show you in the NX console, in the libs backend, mastery DB. I have the generate types script here. So I can just hit play on that whenever I want to,
yeah,
and it'll give me the type. So that's been a nice workflow as well because I'm still at the stage where I'm making changes to this initial
yeah,
table structure and setup as I rebuild what already exists
yeah. I love having
in
that
the
button.
firmware. Yeah,
So
that's pretty nice.
for anyone watching this later, I just threw up the. Well, you can check the chat for the link to where we show this, but using NX then and the NX console is kind of like this kind of utility that Evan will need to run whenever he wants to, generate types because his database changed. Now he's got that nice button right there on the left hand side.
Yeah.
You can just click that. I mean, there's also just the really nice NX script you can run too, just from the command line, because that's what that button is essentially,
Yeah,
right?
that's what that
So
button is. Like if I hover over this and go look, it shows me the actual in the project JSON for
mm,
this lib shows
yep.
me generate types and what it does. So it
So you can
runs.
click it in the IntelliSense or whatever they call that right above
Yeah.
line 27, and that would work too. But yeah,
Oh, does it? Oh, this part here.
yeah,
Yeah, I
yeah,
never use that.
yeah. Me
There's
neither,
so
but
many
it's there.
things.
It's
No,
I
it's
like that
great.
it's there.
I do. But yeah, I tend to go for this instead. It's a little better, easier to spot organization wise.
Yeah,
Yeah, in this case, I would think potentially of eventually moving this into a workspace generator so that it has more access to things like the project structure and whatnot. But for now, using the run command was more than enough, and it does the
Yeah.
job. I'll optimize that later. Um, yeah, that part has been super good so far. I quite enjoy that. And the next thing that I'm facing, so let me see if I spin this up. Oh, I also, I don't know how deep we want to dive into this because I'm not sure we do, but I've decided to go all in on a kind of middleman functions. So I know that we can query the Supabase. They generate the nice APIs for us, so I can
Yeah.
just from the front end client talk directly to them. But there are so many times where I need to do somewhat intense aggregation of data, and that I need to do. I don't know what I will need to do yet.
Hmm.
So I've added the extra layer of abstraction of just making all of my backend calls to a Lambda function. So a
I
single
see.
cloud function that runs there and then has a little mini router essentially. So I've
Yeah.
created a
Are
REST
you
API just for myself.
are you using the Supabase Edge functions then, or are you
No,
using something
I
else?
I'm using something else because I didn't quite like the restrictions that are currently there. That was the main reason I didn't go with that.
Gotcha.
Um,
Which
Using
restrictions are you
Deno,
talking about? Oh,
I don't
using Deno.
remember. I don't remember for sure. So one was using Deno or Dino. That was fine. I wouldn't have necessarily mind it, but then there was something else as well. Um,
Yeah. There are some restrictions on that locally, unfortunately.
yeah, that was
It's
probably part of it. And also, I'm obsessed with getting end-to-end type safety.
mm,
So what I chose to do is I have a simple Lambda handler here that bounces off to a TR that uses AWS, but it bounces off to a TRPC
right.
router. So if you haven't heard of TRPC, it is really simple. The basics of it is you define a router using their tools. A router being, hey, when let's say think of it in the context of Express. Express has a router, right?
Hmm.
And it says if you're hitting this API endpoint, you will call this Express like management function, and depending on what the URL you're hitting is, after like the base URL, let's say it's like slash posts, then it will run a different function based on whether it is a GET or a post request, be it slash posts, whether it has other things like, colon ID for the parameters, all those sorts of things. That sense of a router of what API endpoint am I hitting and what should I do when that is hit.
Mm.
That's all TRPC really is. But the way it does it is you define all these things using some of their helper functions, and then you export the type of that app router to use within the rest of your application.
Mm.
So when you're in a mono repo in particular, the end result is your front end uses the TRPC client, which is super lightweight. But then because you're doing that, your front end knows what types your back end expects.
Hmm.
I'll give you an example. So I have this call for, um, let's see, one that has an input. Yeah, okay, let's do this one. So um, we're having slugs in the new version. Right now in the app, um, if I create a record here, well, even like the campaign, here's the campaign, right? It
Hmm.
doesn't have a slug because all the campaigns across the whole software as a service thing just use their unique ID as their ID, which is
Okay.
great for public stuff, but it's not
So
easily findable.
you mean a named slug? You want to
Yeah, so
change
I
that?
wanted I wanted
Okay.
name slugged, and that was another part of the migration as well, as I really wanted named slugs. I wanted to be able to go to something 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 slash Akko to see my character's details
Gotcha.
instead of slash campaign hash slash Akko's hash. Like that's a mess. I really wanted that, and I do it by scoping it at the universe level. So we'll have like a slash u slug for the universe, and the
Nice.
universes have to be uniquely named, I think. Um, there's always going to be some point where you have to have them be unique. Regardless, I need to check if, even within the universe, you
Yeah.
can't use the same slug for two players, right? They need to have unique slugs. So I have a quick function that does
Well,
that.
is the idea you want to like SEO this so that people
It's
can
not
search
it's
for it?
not about SEO,
Okay.
maybe eventually. There will be public stuff. It just looks nicer. It feels more comfortable.
Yeah.
Um, Yeah, we'll see what it turns into
Yeah,
eventually,
yeah,
but
yeah.
I see it as a requirement longer term. So,
Yeah, I guess what I was getting at is
mm.
like you could totally do that and not have them be unique, right? Like if someone has, if you just wanted to have like character AO be a thing, like you could totally do that and just like show a 404 if that person like someone's probably logged in. Let's assume someone's logged in. You can show them their AO there, like just from finding that
Yeah, but
from the
then
client side.
there is already public sharing. So if I
Oh,
go in an
okay.
incognito window to
Ah,
this campaign, it works because I've turned on public sharing. Or
got
maybe it
it.
doesn't work. Yeah, it works. And you don't get things like
That's actually
editing.
really
You
cool,
don't get
Bad.
things. Yeah, and it can be really helpful because you don't always want to force your players who need to look at the notes to sign stuff in. You can have hidden sections, you can have records that are not shown, all of these sorts of things. But especially, I think there's a lot of actual play, like people that play online and have audiences. It's nice to just have some way of sort of like saying, hey, what
Yeah.
happened? Oh, yeah, what's that bit of lore? Oh, that's interesting. And, eventually we can do stuff like
There are
having
so
open
many neat
question
things about your
sections.
app here too. Can you collapse recover the amulet there? Those dots on the right hand side, are
Oh,
they from
yeah.
a sessions? Okay.
Yeah, that's how. So we have the concept of arcs that wrap sessions, so you can organize them better,
Hmm.
and how long you spend in each one. So like we played in this one, it took us 26 sessions before we kind of solved the puzzle of that, like the main thing of that.
Yeah.
And then these ones are long rests, so they're like, how many times did they actually go to sleep for the night? Um,
Oh, okay. So it's
which
like this
then
is like a top level view of everything. Wait, what is the Lost Island? Is that a campaign?
Yeah, that's the campaign that we're playing
Okay.
in, the setup that we have. And it starts off really small. They do, a couple of small things, etc. And then by the time they're finished now, it's like world-changing events.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Okay, I got off topic.
Sorry, I got too interested in this. We were talking about slugs and
Bugs.
name slugs, and so like if we just
Yeah.
wanted to find the character Ao, but that character Ao is in I don't know what was the boxed campaign you had? Like what's a really common character maybe
Well,
that
it,
would be
it,
in a
it
lot
isn't
of
even
people?
necessarily that. All right, here's an example. I'm
Sure.
using the Feywild, which is a very common uh, what do you call it? Like a mirror dimension to the material plane
Ah,
within D&D Forgotten Realms style
do
of
you
thinking.
play World of Warcraft ever?
I have not. I mean,
Okay.
I've
It
certainly
sounds like
immersed
the
enough in
Emerald
culture.
Dream to me.
Sure.
But
Yeah, I'm
I'm
sure
sure
they
there's
spun
slightly
off
different
of
words
that.
for it.
It's
Yeah.
it's fairy, right? Fairies existed as a
Hmm.
concept. It's like Earth, but not. It's that kind of thing. Place
Got
of,
it.
of fairies and weird magic
But
and Seelie
it's
Court and
another
all that.
dimension where like the physical stuff looks the same as our dimension.
Yeah, in the Feywild, it is that. It's the material plane
Okay.
is mirrored, but everything is heightened and more magical. There's also the Shadowfell, which is the non-magical kind of decrepit version of that as well. Those three are bound together,
Got
sort
it.
of in the center of the map. But then you've also got the elemental planes, like the plane of fire, and things like that. And you can go even outwards to. There's a whole cosmology here.
Yeah.
But my
Shadowfell
point
sounds like
is,
upside down from
yep,
almost
definitely
that show.
inspired by that. In fact, Vecna, that they refer to him as in the show, is
That's
in the Shadowfell.
yeah, okay. That
Yeah,
makes sense. I wonder why they didn't
definitely.
call that in the show. That seems like it would have been a nod to the D&D players who would
I think
probably be watching.
Shadowfell might have come later than the 80s. So like Vecna would have been
Oh,
there, but I think Shadowfell wasn't. I don't know for sure. Don't at me necessarily, but yeah, they're pretty on top of it. But yeah, Stranger Things comes from D&D lore for sure.
yeah,
My
yeah.
my point is, so the Plane of Fire or the City of Brass, those are well-known locations. I didn't rename them. They're
Hmm.
so obvious. So if I have a slug that is inherited here and automatically done for at the City of Brass, that can't be referenced like uniquely across all thousand users, right?
Yeah. So you kind of
uh
have to nest that inside of like that.
Something,
The city of
it has
brass
to
is
be
always
nested in
going to
something.
exist, but
Yeah,
depending on which campaign you're in, different things would have happened in there, and that's what you
yeah,
want to show to the
exactly.
user.
So my point would be, okay, I need something top level which I think is safe to do as the universe, because
Hmm.
each of these records that are inside a universe they're unique to that, and as long as the universe is unique, and again, people are going to be annoyed with that, but I also don't want to go org slug / universe to give
Yeah.
them sort of anything goes. I'll just do universes, and someone will be like, well, Maya's also called the Lost Island. Why can't I have that slug? Oh, well, sorry. You could do the Lost Island -2, whatever,
The
because it's
Lost Island.
public, right? People can see it
Well,
publicly. I don't want to nest too deep. I don't want to have them memorize my weird org name or whatever.
it would be
But then,
neat to be
yeah,
like just dungeonmastery.com slash the city of brass as like a what do you call
it
it, like the
would.
kebab case slug, but then show,
Yeah.
hey, this is mentioned in all these
Oh boy.
universes that are public, so click
Suppose we
one.
could do that. I also am really hesitant about that top level slugs
Yeah.
because that prevents me from doing stuff with my routing.
Mm,
Because
right.
someone could decide to create the route or the universe or the record or whatever called
Called a u
campaigns.
then you're
Yeah. And then you
yeah.
also have to be careful too, because you can have in the same universe, you can have, well, look, it's unrealistic to think that that things can't have the same name. You could
Right.
meet for sure in the real world, you could meet two people that are called Aliana, right?
Hmm.
In fact, we have a goddess Hayako in our campaign, which I didn't write any notes on. Oh, I'm in the incognito one. We have a goddess Hayako, but our character Ako's real name is Hayako because she's named after the goddess. You know, um,
Oh wow. Are there some times where you think there's two
for
distinct
sure.
entities, but they turn out to be the same? That's like a
Yeah,
trope,
there's
right?
that, and yeah, so then you would actually have a temporary record that you would keep up as a DM to keep people confused, but in your private notes, you would like actually link them
By the
together. So
way, Eiko is Hayako.
I have like private notes here where I can, yeah, do that
Funny.
sort of stuff. Yeah.
Okay.
We had a whole thing in our campaign with their parent, like
Mm,
my three of our characters' fathers um, was this prime minister, but actually there's a few different secrets about him which they eventually figured out that one, he's not an elf, he's actually a dragon, and two, who the last 35 years it hasn't been him, it's been some devil that had captured and imprisoned him and has been disguised as him this whole time,
what? So
to the point
that's
where this character, his father, is not even the same father as the others. It's the devil that is his father.
if there's
Um,
people from your campaign watching right now, did you just spoil it for them?
no, no, they've learned all that.
Okay.
We're way far ahead.
Got it.
Yeah, no,
It's
it's all
still
good.
really
All right,
cool.
I want to show you the TRPC stuff and why I've embraced and liked it a lot. So
Yeah.
this is the cloud function. At some stage, um, I will hit the specifically in the router. I'll hit the check slug endpoint, and um, that will run a procedure and it'll do some, I don't know if you know what Zod is, but essentially type checking to validate that it's getting an object where the slug is a string, the collection is a string, and there's an optional Boolean for whether I want the exact slug to be checked or something like that.
Got it.
I have,
I've heard about Zod. I've got to get into it. Let me say hi to
me
Kevin real
too.
quick. What's
Yeah,
up,
yeah.
Kevin? We're looking at Evan's product he's put out there called Dungeon Mastery. It's like a way of, well, how would you describe it in one word, in one sentence, Evan?
The one sentence is if it is a cross-linked note-taking tool for tabletop RPG game masters. That's the one shot, and that's a bunch of
Yeah.
buzzwords that are thrown in there. But if you play anything like D&D and you have an excessive amount of notes that you're having trouble keeping organized, it as a tool lets you create the notes and then create links to records inside there, and then create links to records inside there, so you can bounce around with your details and quickly find them as you go.
Yeah.
Um, that's the tool itself.
And we're
And
looking at the TRPC piece of it right now, which
yeah,
TRPC is something every time I talk to Evan, I feel like if Evan pitches TRPC, and I remain unconvinced,
well, I'm
but
gonna get. I need to get to this because this is
yeah,
a
yeah,
great example.
yeah.
So on my back end, so from my front end, I have occasionally I need to call an endpoint that will check the slug that I have that I want to create as a user,
Hmm.
and will say, hey, is this already in use or not? So I need to check potentially a few different places in my database to see if that slug is on those table in those
Got
columns
it.
and those values. So
and this is where those edge functions come in. Like you're doing that with
yeah,
JavaScript, right? You're not using a Postgres function. I wish I was good
no,
enough at Postgres to just be able to use the Postgres function for that kind of stuff, but I am not. So I probably have to
potentially I
do the same
could.
thing.
Yeah, well, potentially I could, but the thing is, it will slow me down while I'm developing, and the requirements aren't really fixed right now.
Yeah.
So this gets existing slugs function um, is pretty lightweight. I'd already written it previously, but what if I need to check more tables or something like that? I
Mm.
want it to be in TypeScript where I'm familiar with it. Okay, but here's the idea: the router, when I hit the endpoint, I will hit the whatever my API base URL is / mastery. Yeah, I'm in mastery, and then that'll go to my mastery router in TRPC, which then has these three subroutes. So I will
Mm-hmm.
then go to the check slug route, and that will bring up I'll bring up this
Procedure.
procedure.
Okay.
Yeah, so TRPC has procedures. Um, I'll check the inputs, and then I will run a query. So the query
Okay.
is an asynchronous function, and then I can do something. So in this case, I'll use my function to actually, check this. I could have put this logic in here, but I needed it in one other place too, so I abstracted it to
So this procedure
a
just gives
helper.
the boolean. That's what's returned back to the client.
Yeah,
Okay.
what I needed from this was, is this existing or not? I
Is
could
the slug
potentially say,
available?
is the
Yeah.
slug available? Yeah,
Got it.
exactly.
Okay.
That's what I needed. So I needed from the front end to say, is this available? And then get back true or false. So,
Got it.
okay, but you notice I didn't type this function at all. I didn't say that it takes this as an input or it takes this
Yeah.
Boolean
On
as an
line 8,
output.
you say it
I,
returns
I
a
did
boolean,
here,
and you
but
could
I
probably
could
remove
technically,
that. Yeah.
I could remove that. It actually, I just put that there for my own reference because initially it didn't return a Boolean when I was, moving this over to
Sure.
TRPC.
Yeah.
The last thing I would show here is the get existing slugs returns a string array. What this is where I actually query my database, right? So I have my Supabase client here on the back end, on the node side of things, that
Mm-hmm.
will do a from a this collection, and it'll select that one field, and then
So
it'll do its dance of data and error.
so that
Um,
client, your when you created the client, you're passing in your uh, the SUPA key, I guess, right? The
yeah, yeah. So I have
okay,
a specific thing to do it
the
per
service.
environment, but yeah, I have the database URL and the service API key. So these are the
Yeah,
ones that I probably will just pass through the user's details, but in case I
mm-hmm.
need to do something more heavy duty, I have the control now. I'll clean that up later. And actually, well,
Yeah.
this isn't a great example of that, but with, let's say, the
Well, for
create
checking the
campaign.
slugs, I feel like you do want to use the service key because you want to see all the information.
Yeah,
But
sorry, that's a great example of that. But for
yeah,
creating a campaign, for example,
mm-hmm.
I use the context object that TRPC gives me, where I can send the DWT along
Okay,
with all the requests I make,
mm-hmm.
and then I can get the auth user out of that and use him or use them in the rest of the
Yeah.
functions I do.
So
I can show you that in a second, but
yeah,
let me finish. I know you
yeah.
have questions.
Sorry.
I want to finish showing you the value of TRPC because so far this is just a backend thing. This is fine, whatever. But my point is, I get existing slugs, I check the actual Supabase client, and then I return whether there are any existing or not. Okay, but let's
Mm-hmm.
go look in the database or in the code base for check slug. Here in my service is just where I make the actual calls. So this
So
will
we're on the
be
front end
triggered.
now.
Yeah, we're back in the front end now.
Got it. Okay.
Um, what I've done is I've created a Supabase service that exposes TRPC.
Mm-hmm.
So if I jump through to that real quickly, I have this, because I'm in Angular. If I have a Supabase service, I create the TRPC proxy client, and I create, where do I even create it? Oh, I don't create a Supabase client here because I technically, no,
Yeah,
I do.
if you're
Sorry.
using
Okay,
the
I do.
service key inside the API, you shouldn't need
I
it, right?
technically shouldn't, but there are some times where I might need Supabase. Well, a great example of where I need Supabase is I'm using it for auth. So
Oh,
I don't want to have to do that on my Lambda.
yeah, of course.
So I do create this here, and Supabase client, create client, use the environments, but this one is targeted to a user. So this is a client-based URL, not the service account tokens and things like that. But
Right.
I have this, I expose it. I do a behavior subject to expose my auth state so I can have side effects that are triggered with RxJS based on the auth state. And I create the TRPC proxy client here. which this is where with the Git headers, I include a header JWT token that my TRPC router can provide as context to the rest of the backend functions.
Got it.
But based off of this, because I'm creating this and passing through this app router, so remember this app router is, if we are back in the TRPC router where we're exposing our endpoints, we expose the type route, this app router that TRPC builds, we expose that type to use in the rest of our application. Well, here is where I'm using it to define what this TRPC client is.
Okay.
I also say, like, how do you want to open links and what is your base URL and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
But that stuff works, and that's a really simple service. If I go back to the actual data service where I'm checking the slug, so from the front end, I've wired up the UI and I say, okay, when they fill out this form field, check the slug. I take this and I call to that service TRPC, and then from here on, no types imported in this service, in this front end. I get the available endpoints just as autocomplete. So I know that mastery is there. And if I give a typo, that doesn't exist. That's not available on my backend. And then if I want to see what else is here, I've got those 3 bits that I had before.
Yeah.
They're right there. I can use them. And same thing with check slug. We're using that now. And I'm going to call its query. And if I pass through something here, let's say incorrect, well, that wouldn't even work anyway. But if I say, is exact is a number, it's going to yell at me because is exact is not correct. Even if I fix that typo, it's going to yell at me because it expects it to be a Boolean. So it knows exactly what I need here to get the thing. And it also knows what this response is. So if I say this is a promise number that it returns, it's going to yell at me because the backend returns a Boolean promise, not a number promise. I just think that is freaking magical.
Yeah.
Not to mention, I can just jump through right to check slug from here, from my front end right to my back end implementation. I've never had that before. It's always like, let me do a search for check slug to see where I've done that in the background. And heaven forbid, I've called it the same thing in multiple places, like in my reducer or something like that. Then I have to be like, oh, where does it actually live? Oh, okay, it's up here. There's the function.
The last piece is actually interesting. until this point, I'm still just like, okay, so this is just an extra abstraction on top of like what I would normally do. Like so this is what I would normally do for something like this, Evan. I would just have a Express app that we'd run. Yeah. And then I would create a client, probably using NX. So just create a JavaScript client to like interact with that Express app. But I'm seeing, so like when you said click on the check slug and it takes you right to there, I do not have that. Like that level of tying things together doesn't exist in my implementation. But the type safety part does. I guess another piece would be if I were ever to change the implementation of my API to the part where it breaks the interface, I'd actually have to touch the JavaScript client as well. And I would know that as soon as it would happen because my test would start to fail. But I would have to actually add an additional manual step in there, which it looks like you don't have to have. Let me hit Kevin's question here too. Does the TRPC keep open a single WebSocket connection, or is it per function? I didn't think TRPC uses WebSockets, or does it? Do you know?
Yeah, it can. I don't need that yet. I will eventually figure that out. For now, I'm doing the Lambda function setup, so I have an AWS Lambda function here that I've got spun up with serverless so I can develop locally. And all it does is it uses one of these adapters to kind of forward, or it essentially, well, I had to, on a side project, deal with this the other day, but it does some weird thing about, HTTP responses and dealing with that and forwarding the context. It's tough code for me to follow, a lot of wild types going on. But the functionality is when the AWS like API gateway like passes through to your cloud function, to this Lambda function, the request, at that stage, it passes through what the TRPC router needs to handle it. So you have a what they call a lambda-lith, a monolithic lambda that for sure. And in that case, the question is just maybe you should be using Express, and they do have an adapter for Express. That would kind of be doing the same thing. It's just whether it's
Yeah.
always running or spun up on demand. I did it this way because I wanted to get it working, and potentially I could break it into smaller chunks. The other thing I would say is TRPC to me seems really well suited for the kind of, Svelte kit slash remix slash Next.js things where you essentially have your back end and your front end so tightly coupled that it makes perfect sense. You're not worrying about an API necessarily. You're worried
Yeah.
about your front end client having access to what it needs and offloading processing stuff onto the server instead of doing it on the client. So the
Yeah.
back end for front end sort of concept.
Yeah.
In the BFF, this is like the best use case for it I can think of.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I feel that it's a bit of magic that it works this way.
Yeah.
I've worked on projects before where, okay, if I made a change here to this backend endpoint, at the very least, I would have to make the change here in the backend and say, okay, I need this slug. I need to rename this because it needs to be like now customer slug, and I need it to
Yeah.
be something else, another object with another property.
Yeah.
Then I would have to go to the shared types folder where I would adjust the typing of the get slugs response or the input of the get slugs input, right? I'd have to adjust the type there so that this wasn't yelling at me correctly anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Then, or if I was working not in a monorepo setup, I'd have to like run some code gen
Yeah, that would be
to get
terrible.
the types extracted correctly. Then I have to
Yeah.
adapt the function to do that. I do all the same work I would do in the back end. And then I have to go into my app client
Yeah.
and also update this
I
to pull in the new type to adjust what is returned and
yeah,
build a
yeah.
new thing up.
I
It
I
just
think
is
the
faster this way.
the big difference between the way I would go about it and the way I'm seeing here is like this is a 2-node structure versus what I would
Mm-hmm.
have as a 3-node structure.
Yeah, and
Um, where
because
you
they're tightly coupled, I don't need the three nodes. I just
exactly.
want the one.
Well, you shouldn't really need that third. Like that third one is really just a reflection of what's going
Mm-hmm.
on in the other two.
Yeah,
I
exactly.
guess the interesting thing there though is, well, I don't know.
Yeah,
There may be
it's
something to wanting to purposely touching like there's the one in the middle. Like that's the for me that's the JavaScript client, which is clearly being generated via the code. Like that's I guess what your context is doing. I guess that's coming from TRPC. Is that a package? Is that how it comes in?
let's go to the superbase service where I define it. This create TRPC proxy client.
Yeah. Okay. So that's coming from TRPC client at the top.
Yeah, there's stuff in here that I haven't explored fully.
Mm-hmm.
There's like transformers. I don't know what that does. They have pretty good docs. They're pretty focused on React land, so I've had to make some
Yeah.
adaptations.
This is super interesting. Maybe
They
going back
work.
to Kevin's question,
Oh yeah.
one of the things I've been working on for my side project, the MMO game I've showed
Mm-hmm.
you before, Evan, is just like doing doing this but with WebSockets, and like the goal for me had actually always been to write backend code that when you expose it generates a client. And it actually like the approach I would take is like you write the reducer. So you write here's the events that could happen and here's how
Mm-hmm.
that those events adjust the backend state, and also like here's how that backend exposes that state to the logged in user to specific users, and then it would generate the front end client from there and have
Right.
full type safety around that. So I think that's kind of doing a similar thing where I think the idea there would be like you write all the stuff on the back end and then the client gets exposed, then you would import that client from import that client into the front end. And I think you could have like a similar 2-node structure. I mean, I'm having 3 at the moment because I'm writing that library as we're doing it.
Mm-hmm.
But Yeah, that's quite neat.
Yeah,
I'll have to see how TRPC does WebSockets because now I'm very intrigued.
yeah,
Because I love
I
WebSockets. I actually wish. I think I've told you about this before, Evan. I wish so much more of the web was WebSockets,
those
not this
WebSockets.
weird
Yeah,
call. The front end always has to be the one initiating some sort of transaction or some sort of interaction. But
yeah. So so they have this stuff. So this would be on the server side. You have to like spin up your WebSocket and do the same thing of applying your handler to it. So in this case, they have a server for it's coming from WS package, I guess, and then you apply the context to that, so it
mm,
gets the information it needs to do the normal stuff of like taking an HTTP request and whatever else needs to be done there. And then I guess you subscribe, right? You say when it's connected, do these things, and when it's
mm,
closed, do this stuff, and when this happens, do this stuff. I don't know enough about WebSockets to know, but right now it looks like it is
yeah, it's
still kind
just
of like they're working on it.
yeah. Well,
Um,
it's just the event handlers. So like in
yeah.
my in the libraries I'm running because I'm an RxJS guy, right?
Hmm.
I'm just taking those event handlers and like um, turning them into streams or turning them into observables, and then I'm composing with that. Like that's the level at which like a lot of this stuff happens. Is on the back end I see like there's the observable stream of information coming in from all the connected clients,
Yeah.
and I'm just like orchestrating those together because each user has a separate connection. I'd actually don't have it where like you could totally
Right.
do it where everyone's on the same uh, WebSocket. I don't know what you call that. Like the concept would be like a room,
Yeah.
but I just have uh, each connected client uh, has one connection to the backend, and then the backend is going to then take in. If there's three users connected, there's three different connections, and the backend just operates as like the centralizer. Um, so it's
Yeah.
because I'm doing the MMO, I want to base it off of proximity. So like a user shouldn't get an update if something happened outside of their field of view. Like
Right.
that's just the
Yeah.
idea.
Yeah,
So
exactly. Keep it data limited. Yeah,
exactly.
I will eventually want to look into this because, again, given the idea that these records and campaigns are public, I do
Mm-hmm.
eventually want to make it so that you can grant access to your players' uh, control over their own records, and that you could potentially have everyone just use this at the same time as a play sheet, so that people are, you assign a note taker, but everyone else can see as they're typing what notes are coming in. And in that context, it would be less about, making batch changes to the records and then reloading the record all the time, but instead just streaming the changes as they come.
Yeah. Is your
Yeah,
daughter
that type of
sick,
thing.
Evan?
Yeah, she's been home from school for a while.
Oh no, that sucks.
Eh,
Yeah, our kids
yeah,
have been sick all week too.
it's time of year. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
this time of year. Everyone's like, can't vacation can't get here soon enough. We need to do it before the vacation.
Yeah. Oh man, I see a oh there it is. Another Kevin from
But
comment a comment from Kevin.
hmm,
So you can use WebSocket or HTTP and the
yeah,
TypeScript LSP. What's the LSP? Language Service Process? Will just infer all the
maybe,
types across backend for free. Yeah. Yep. So, yeah,
yeah,
I think it all comes back to the just the two nodes versus the three node structure that's going on here. Um,
yeah.
and then TRPC I guess is just generating that interface as we go,
Well,
visibly
that's the
displaying the
thing.
client.
It's doing it in the TypeScript server of your editor. It's not doing it in anything that needs to be generated or exported. So
Yeah.
the TRPC client that's generated, while it will have some information from this app router, it's not as much as you think. It's pretty lightweight. Instead, it's just providing core functionality without needing the safety guards in because your safety guards are there at compile time.
Hmm.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So they don't need to bundle something. here, when you're calling this from the service, they don't need to bundle anything here that checks if slug is a string or if collection is not, or if this is a Boolean. That doesn't have to be in the client code
Yeah,
at
yeah.
all because it's
Yeah, just
handled
because
by
of the way
TypeScript. And
just because of the way the TRPC client is being created. That's all handled from where you create the backend code, right?
exactly. Well, not just that, but it's because the type safety is there. It relies upon the fact that your code will not compile if you have this error in there.
Mm-hmm.
So it can trust that this will be a string unless you've done some sort of like any. You can still break stuff, but it doesn't build that in. You rely upon your
Yeah,
end-to-end type safety, and less code ends up in the browser as a result.
right.
You
Yeah.
need to be extra careful then to also do something like the validation with Zod to say, like, I need you to throw an error here if this is not a string before we even try to run this function. That's what Zod is really useful for, is that
So that
yes, it
input
types this as a
method is
string.
like
Yeah.
validating that the stuff coming in is actually what it says it's in.
Yeah, exactly.
Is
I
that a
need to get into
runtime
error
check then?
handling. It is a runtime check, as far as I
Okay.
know. I need to get into it, and I need to see like what happens if you make it incorrectly,
Yeah.
which I've actually struggled with because the type safety is there and I can't toss
Yeah.
wrong objects in.
See,
But
I'm a nerd and I wrote my own validate functions for like the backend stuff.
yeah,
Uh
I feel like this is really helpful for like someone solved that is basically what I understand Zod to be.
yeah.
Um, and there's a few others available. They reference them a lot in the TRPC docs
Mhm.
of like validation of stuff. You can use, yeah, superstruct is one, yup is another, and
Mhm.
Zod.
At the bottom it showed custom. What does the custom look like?
And the custom would just be you take, this is for output, but it would be the same for input. You take the value where you don't know it, and then you return what it is once you
Ah,
know what
okay.
the value is. Yeah.
Interesting that they actually don't type that. Like you could do on that line with the dot output. I guess they don't have line
Hmm.
numbers, but you could say asserts value um, values of type
Yeah.
object with a greeting being a string. But
Yeah,
yeah,
maybe so. They have a
I
lot
guess you
of,
don't need that with the way they're doing it.
no, there's a lot of stuff I have not gone into in this
Mm-hmm.
at all. Like using, anyway, they have like helper inference helpers and stuff. I've added that in here, but I haven't been using it where you can say, this is the input for this
Yeah,
route. And then without me having to type it separately, this is now the source of truth for that. I don't need to do it here in the router input, but I could use this maybe elsewhere. I'm not sure I like that. I'm doing the same thing with the Supabase stuff as well, where where's my shared types? I have the database, which is generated from Supabase, which has this public tables, arcs, arcs as an example, but row, ID, etc.
mm-hmm.
And then that's a little too much for me to say. So then I have a backend thing where let's say specifically for the arc, well, I then abstract that down to a single reference point. The thing is, though, it's not perfect, right? Because the backend structure with camel case or kebab case or whatever it is not what the front end likes to use. I'm not sure if I want to go. So private notes is an example, right? This underscore private snake case, private underscore notes would be the backend. That's what it's stored on as a table. But in the
Yeah.
front end, I would want it to be camel case, right? The front end is
Mm-hmm.
used to that. In fact, I have a lot of things set up. I have my linter set up to yell at me if it's not.
Yeah.
So I have to do transformations. And the other thing is the database doesn't know that this is a specific type of JSON object or an array. It just knows that it's JSON, right? So I'll show you an example of that. Let me go look for private notes and linked or any of these arrays. If I look in the database for private notes, it thinks it's JSON because that's how
Yeah.
Firebase does it. It's just a black hole. And the same thing for linked. Even any arrays, anything you store as an arrays, even if they're string arrays or numbers, it refers to them as JSON because right now Postgres, I guess, doesn't have great understanding of arrays. So that's great. That's fine. but it means that I need to then manually go in and I create a TypeScript helper for myself to take this and then modify. Oh, this is probably easier to read. I take this exact row and then I omit certain properties and I include their more correctly typed variations.
Mm-hmm.
But it's a little messy. I feel like I'm doing the work twice. You know,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. I don't know. It's coming along all right. My next struggle is you can see here in my tables, I have a lot of join tables, right? So a universe is fine. It has all the details it has. But a universe will have inside it the different record types. So it has campaigns, right? And a campaign will have arcs inside it, and arcs will have sessions inside them. That's a very hierarchical relationship.
Mm-hmm.
But siblings to campaigns now are the record types like NPCs. And right now, because they have some different data, I've had them all as their own tables. So I have a table for players, I have a table for sessions, I have a table for NPCs,
Mm-hmm.
etc. But I've been looking at the data and there are huge amounts of overlap. And I'm trying to come up with a way that I can maybe have a single table for
Mm-hmm.
these, but I don't know. I'm really going through this now and I'm trying to say
Yeah.
like maybe I like here's the unique stuff. So location will have population. None of the others have population.
Yeah.
It'll have demographics. Creations have what type of creation they are,
Yeah.
um, and so on. A lot of the records have nicknames that you can add. So if I am like here and I look at Akko and I edit her, she can sometimes be called Coco. That's her nickname within the group. Uh,
Poor little one.
Oh, no. Also, her full name is Hayako Farhart. I want to be able to reference her as that in other fields, right?
Yeah.
So those nicknames are important too. And I mean, like, there's all of those are unique, yeah, but the overlap is they all have titles, they all have
Yeah.
slugs, they all have created at, updated at, they all have notes, except for arcs.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's always like one of them has an
I
exception.
suppose like the way you could do it is like, well, there's a couple ways. Like one of them is to
Yeah.
just to have like the JSON field inside
Yeah.
of your table, so that way you could like put things on there, and uh, it's like okay that some of them don't
Yeah.
have some of the ones the other entities do. I think the
Yeah.
other way would just be like you have a table for all the common stuff, and then you also have like the table for entity specific stuff.
Yeah.
You can like join things that way too. So
Yeah, and I kind of like the former better because it'll just be less tables here. I'm already getting a little annoyed with how many tables there are.
yeah.
For me, it was okay. This is the stage I am at with my refactor now. I've gotten things wired up to the point where I can create a universe, I can create a campaign, and I can create an organization, I can create a campaign in the universe. But now I want to create a record. More importantly, when I load that universe, I want to be able to return all of the records inside there.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm in here in my backend inside get universe with records. I have this big long ass function where I have to do all of the dance of bail out if there's an error and check if this is a public or private, a whole bunch of stuff. And I'm finally at step 3. I've got the campaigns. So load a universe. If there's a campaigns for that universe on the join table, return it. Great. Now I need to get the records. And I was like, oh no, I have to do this same thing for all 5 of my record types, or now I have 6 or 7. That's annoying. I
Yeah.
just want to be able to query one table for records for the universes. But then how do I keep the data separate? So I think what I've leaned towards is I'm building this up. This is not how it currently exists. I'm building this up. I will have as much as I can shared, and I'll do that JSON field for the extra
Mm.
data. If I find that that's too hard to index, because like, all right, some of these are interesting. Arcs has a unique property of rest. That's what we saw on this page of within this arc. Well, no, that's not a great example because that rest belongs to a session.
That's
But even
rests are the
session,
6, the moon with the
yeah,
6 you see on the side.
yeah. In
Okay.
this case, what it's saying is that all of the sessions that belong to this arc this one has one long rest, this one has two. If I edit this session, I can put down long rests and the
Oh, I see.
timing of it.
Cool.
So then it aggregates that. So that doesn't belong to the arc actually. That belongs to the sessions inside the arc. But again, then I would have to be like, okay, for this arc, let me look up the session records. Or sorry, let me look up all matching arc sessions that that they're on this join table.
Mm-hmm.
I'll get those sessions back. And then because those sessions aren't sessions, they're records, I'll have to then dig into the JSON property to find, let's say, sessions that have no long rests or something like that. If I wanted to filter the data, or
Mm-hmm.
sessions that are longer than 2 hours, anything that is inside there, do I pay an extra cost for having that inside a JSON field? Is it any different to having it in its own table? I don't know those kind of things. So
Yeah, I
I'm
don't think
mindful.
so. Like I think actually in the there's a special operator for getting stuff inside of JSON as I recall. I think it's like a
Yeah.
skinny arrow. Um so like normally you'd say table dot this and
Uh-huh.
then that would give you the like the column, the data held in that column. But then if that column gave you back a JSON, or maybe it's like the BJSON or something like that, you could then do the arrow, skinny arrow from that to get something from inside of that JSON object, and you could do it at the top level like that, I
You mean
believe.
something like that?
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
Okay. Well, I don't get IntelliSense for that, but
Yeah.
okay. Um,
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know how good the template string typing is at the for that kind of thing because I don't know like because it's a
it's there. It's
BJSON. I don't
yeah.
think that like maybe it would be able to generate correct typings to do that. That would be very
Mm.
it would be very impressive because
No,
like the way they
yeah.
generate, it's not from you don't generate from SQL code. You
Yeah.
generate from the actual database, so you can actually see what's inside of all of those BJSONs and it could give you, hey, well, like this is what we got now, so this is
Mm.
what could be in that field right now.
Yeah, but
Your instance looks empty though, so I would
yeah, I don't
expect you
have
wouldn't be
anything
able
in there
to
right
find
now.
that. So,
No,
but if
that's
there
true. But
were data in there, I technically could like spit that out, which is kind of interesting. But I don't think there's anything at the Postgres level. Like the whole point of that
no,
JSON is that it's open.
exactly.
So if you wanted to put types on it, now you're starting to put the constraints back on it, even though it's only at the dev time. But
Yeah.
that would kind of be antithetical to having that JSON be, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, exactly. Like it's meant to be a bit of a black hole.
But it's like it's meant to be a black hole, but it's meant to be a somewhat constrained black hole. Like, you want it. It would be great if we could just have, hey, here's like a union type that would
Hmm.
be all the different things that could be in here. As far as I know, that doesn't exist right now in the TypeScript world anywhere. With any of the Postgres clients I've worked with before, like that's
No,
I've never seen that either. So
no,
I've
I
not
don't
worked
know.
that extensively with it, so maybe I'm wrong, but
I don't know. I had a big learning curve with getting these type lookups to work. So this kind of selector from thing. Uh,
mm.
the documentation was there, but it was still like, I don't understand why this works. So
Yeah. So it's
I,
really interesting actually. So the way the Supabase client works, it's this is not a promise that gets returned. It's
Mhm.
a waitable. Or a thenable. I forget what they call it. So actually, if you like with a promise, if you got rid of the await on line 56 there,
Yeah,
if this were to return a promise, it would instantly kick off. But because
right,
of the way they've done it here, it actually won't start to kick off unless you then it or await it. And
huh,
the idea is so you could do this kind of chaining, because
right,
if each one of these was exposing a promise, then each one of those would be eagerly like going off as soon as you called it. But
right.
they want to allow for that chaining, so it's like you use the chaining there, to the from to the select to the equals to the signal,
Mhm.
to build up the query, and then when you await or when you then, that's when the network request based on that query actually gets fired. So
Yeah. Okay.
it tricks
I,
people up all the time when they first start into Supabase because they expect that to be a promise, but
yeah.
it's not. So
No, that's really cool to know that that's how it works under the hood.
yeah.
What I was meaning to reference was the join tables. So
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I have a table here that's universes, or sorry, orgs underscore universes. So it's a shared key, which is a combination of the two, and it just gives them a relation between each other. Um, and I needed to get an org that has I want the content of an org that matches that universe. So I wanted
Yeah.
essentially under the hood, I wanted to do a lookup on this table for
And
because I have
join
the
it.
universe ID. Tell me which one the org ID is, go to the orgs table and give me the record back for that. And this is a bit of magic, right? Because they share the correct naming,
Yeah.
essentially, and because this table is named orgs underscore users or orgs underscore universes, that references this table and that references this table. And I think I might have also, let me edit this really quick to see. I think these are listed as foreign keys. Yeah, so these are actually linked to those tables as foreign key references.
Yeah.
Then it can do this magic under the hood of like, I will
Yeah.
look up the universes table. I will find the universe ID that matches the current one, and then I'll use that ID in the orgs table. And under the hood, there's magic here that does this. But it's not magic like just pure Postgres magic. It actually knows here that it wants to return an org ID. I think if I change that to star, I might get like the whole
Yeah.
org.
Yeah, you
Yeah,
definitely
I get
would.
the whole thing. That's wild. Like, how does it know? But it is a little bit of magic. And I eventually found the documentation about it, but
Yeah.
it still didn't explain like enough to me. It works, but yeah,
Yeah.
I wouldn't know that from reading it this way, right?
Yeah.
This doesn't. It's cool.
I think that is actually just Postgres. Like that's just Postgres shorthand inside of
Yeah,
select. So
yeah,
like
exactly.
if you
It's
wrote a Postgres query that looked like this, it would work. It's really cool though that the type safety or
yeah.
the TypeScript is able to infer
I,
all that from the
I really like
select string.
Superbase. I like what's possible to do with it. The only thing that throws me off a lot is being a JavaScript developer coming into it.
Mm.
And it's written from a point of view of you probably know Postgres already, and like all
Yeah.
of these things aren't going to be explained to you. And I
Yeah.
get that they need to do that. And if that's their primary development stuff, like the guys that work there, that makes perfect sense. But again, coming in as a JavaScript user, being like, I don't know why that works.
I
You know,
definitely am in that camp. I feel like I'm fairly familiar with Postgres. When I took the time off to work on the course, it became clear to me how little I did know and how much more there was. But the even more crazy thing about sort of that Postgres world is I feel like that assumed understanding that you know what's going on actually permeates
yeah,
all the way down.
yeah,
Like there are so preciously few resources out there for developers who understand development and want to understand Postgres specifically. There's so many preciously few good resources for that. So
yeah,
I'd actually love to be able to put out some more stuff around that. And I've been talking to Supabase just about that a little bit
yeah,
because I feel like people want JavaScript developers want something that looks like Postgres, and they may not know
yeah,
that they want it, but every time I hear like the frustrations with Firebase, excuse me,
yeah,
it's always because it's lacking um, like some relational stuff that
yeah,
people like really do need. Like they're like, I just want to join that table. Why I have to do things this way? Why can't I just, why can't I make a query that is smart enough to do that? And Postgres has all that, and
yeah,
it's out there, but it's like there is this impenetrable shroud of like assumed
yeah.
understanding that is blocking I think a lot of us from getting into this stuff because
Yeah, the other thing is, I'm doing this big long JavaScript chunk here to like, check the user's access, and I'll have to do some of this stuff. But I think
Yeah.
that two or three of these things could be condensed into a view or some sort of procedural call on the Postgres side directly instead of trying to build it together in JavaScript. Once
Yeah.
I have an understanding of what it is, I mean, a similar thing would be like when I create the account right now, um, to create a user, I need to make 8 different calls, right?
Yeah.
Because I need to create the user. I need to create the Stripe user so that I have some sort of like linked reference there. If, when they upgrade, it just gets straightforward. Maybe I don't
Yeah.
have to do that right away, but I have existing users I will need to migrate when I go to version 2. So that has to be done. I have to create the org. I have to do the linked tables. So when I
Mm-hmm.
create the org, I also need to do the org user table, give them a role. Like it just goes on and on. And that's fine. It works because we're on the server. It's much more reliable connection wise than the client. But I would say most of this I will eventually move over to triggers and
Yeah.
things on
Well,
the Postgres side.
yeah. The really nice thing about Postgres too is like all these things that you're doing here. Let's say one of them fails halfway through,
Yeah,
like the third one fails. Like
yeah,
the transactionality is now completely up to you. Like you've got to go
right,
through and undo the things that you had put in the prior steps at, and then that's going to be
right,
different if it failed at the third step versus the fourth step. So
exactly. Which is
figuring
freaking
out,
me out.
but that's what Postgres gives you, like out of the box, is that transactionality that's right there, like to the point where any Postgres triggers you fire based off
Yeah,
of like an insert to a table, if the
yeah,
trigger, the anything uh, caused by that trigger is together in the same transaction. Sorry
yeah,
for your little one,
yeah,
but
yeah. Always coughs are always they sound worse than they are.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah, exactly. That's why I'm doing it this way to get my head around what's the requirement in the language I'm familiar with. But once it's pretty stable, I will move it over to that where it makes sense to do so.
yeah,
And it's not the worst. It's just, again, I don't have IDE support, so it doesn't hold my hand as much as I'm used to when I'm
yeah,
writing stuff. Like I have to go then into, where is it? These migration scripts, and at least
right,
the syntax highlighting is there. That's super nice. And maybe there is some sort of like magic stuff here. Well, that's
yeah.
not
Well, like uh,
IntelliSense. It's
a place where
difficult,
I
but
would like, I just don't know if this is possible or not, but the Postgres has its own scripting language that you use, like when you write a trigger, for example. I forget the name
yeah,
of it, but yeah, I'm curious if that scripting language can actually go make network calls.
yeah,
So that even like the Stripe piece, that would be the interesting piece because
right,
you need to coordinate with some external system, and
yeah,
like if something fails you gotta I guess back out at that level too. But it would be very cool if there was something, so at least for your data, if the Postgres scripting could go out and make that call as part of the transaction too, and
yeah,
then like you get back like from the call to Stripe to create the user or whatever you have to
hmm
do there. You get that information back so you can, you know, as part of that whole transaction that you were showing in JavaScript, it could
yeah,
just all be done at the
yeah.
Postgres level.
Yeah, that
So
would be nice. Again, the main thing for me is there are things that are possible to do, but until the recent version that they had of the uh, Supabase JS, well, anyway, the new CLI stuff they had, it wasn't very practical to put it in your code base, and that bothered
mm,
me. So I didn't like having to go, and this is a wonderful thing where you have this sort of like SQL editor where you can try some stuff out, and
yeah,
then if you have that, then you can go into your database and create, or no, where is it?
yeah.
No, I don't know. You can't. No, you can't do it from
So
the standalone one. In the real
yeah,
Superbase one, you can do the thing and you can create the triggers there, and
hmm
then they just exist. But I
you
need
actually
them in
can
my
see
code base.
them there. They don't have links to it if you click, but if
Oh
you
yeah,
go directly to the URL, like go
oh,
to
it is
database.
there.
Yeah, it's you can see the
Database.
UI. I think it's probably hidden because it's probably something broken. But just replace tables with functions, you can see them all. Um,
Ah, nice.
oh, I
Okay.
guess this is not suitable for production. Also
Well,
noted.
yeah, it says that.
I guess you don't have
Okay.
any functions. Is that why it's showing that?
Yeah, I don't have any.
Okay.
because I
Well,
haven't
that
done any of
explains it.
that in
But
this
like if you
project
add
yet.
functions or triggers, I think you could go to
Yeah.
triggers too, like replace roles with triggers in
Yeah,
the URL.
triggers. I don't have any of
This
those
this is
either.
really nice. Yeah, there we
Ah, cool. Okay.
so you can see them.
Tricky.
I found that out as I was doing the course, but
Yeah.
like this stuff is available live too, and I think actually the trigger UI is like really good.
I
Like
I
I'm
actually,
continually
yeah.
impressed by their dashboard. In my last
Yeah.
video, I wrote about how I'd probably never use PG Admin again, even though I love that thing.
Yeah, I
But
saw that.
I think at this
Yeah.
point I only ever use Supabase to do Postgres, and I only ever use this. Like you could use PG Admin in conjunction with this too. Like all the PG Admin needs is like the URL for your instance. And so like you could do that, but at this point I don't know if why I would, especially
Hmm.
with like the level of like this stuff you're seeing here with the ability to add triggers and stuff like that.
Yeah, it's
So
super helpful.
super helpful.
Yeah. Oh God, I keep saying that. That's my own fault. Yeah, it's great stuff. Um, yeah, that's where I'm at. I'm really happy. I got a lot of work to do this next week. I really want to get back up to a place where I have
Yeah.
a similar setup and I can like even
Are you going
migrate
to try to
some of this
launch with
data.
Supabase this week, or what's the
No,
what's the
no, I'm
goal?
not that close.
Okay.
No, first I have to get all the records in the new format and get it wired back up. And there will be front end changes to that as well because I'm changing the data structure and I'll have to rewrite stuff. Then I need to get real data up into the local database so that I can test it and see like, does everything that works currently now,
Yeah.
all of this stuff still work?
Now, when you
Can I
say
jump
test,
through?
are you talking about manual
No,
testing, or are you going to try
I
to automate
am.
it?
I'm talking about manual testing,
Okay.
but I do have set up also, oh Jesus, where is it? Playwright tests.
Yay.
Um, I did get stuck because I really like in your config you can have the global setup. So I
Hmm.
have this global setup script, but previously I was relying upon a pre-existing user to be in
Mm-hmm.
place. So I would essentially just log in with that user. The cookie for authentication would be there. Following your lead, I wanted to try and do the whole flow of logging in or creating the account with that user
Mm.
in the global setup script too. So it's really just fresh and from scratch. And then you have them sort of like newly created user and logged in
Yeah.
for that because I want to be able to do stuff like, okay, get rid of the storage state when they're anonymous, but
Yeah.
most of my tests they will already be logged in. So I will
Gotcha.
instead have like just the pre-existing one and
Yeah.
not override the state, right?
Yeah.
So I have
See.
both. I need access to both. But the problem I ran into with that was that the URL I return to when I'm logged in and need to create a user is different from when the user already exists. So I ran into the thing of on a fresh launch, sure, it can work, but on a second run through while I'm developing and while the Supabase instance is not empty, I don't know how to do a conditional inside here to be like, okay, now that you've logged in, you also have an additional step here. Let me show you because we have a blank
Yeah.
database now.
We can do
Let me
that.
run my backend.
So are you not clearing out the user between each run?
No, well, I yes, I could, but no.
Yeah. That's what
That
I
that
do
would
in the
be
course.
that would be really annoying for me to develop on. Um,
Oh, I see. Because you'd be clearing out that user each time.
yeah, then I have to then either every time run and create some stuff, which I might do, but then I don't know. What if I created some stuff and then I would just like, let me see if this test works, and then
Yeah.
it clears out the user, and it's like, oh, geez, I got to start everything over again.
Yeah.
It's
I don't
maybe
know.
we'll see,
I like
maybe.
so the there are times where that kind of mutable process works. I actually really like the immutable one
There we go.
where like maybe we had a seed script to get us to where back to like the starting point for our user. But
Okay, this is all working locally now.
mm,
So I sign in here. I create something like, back
woo,
at uh,
super.
test.com. Sure.
Oh, sure.
Supaship.com.
Yay.
There you go. Um, I send that link, it goes to URL. I could build in the auth thing here, I found out. Superbase started adding that. I don't want to
Mm.
do that yet though, because I've been spending too long on account stuff. Instead, I go up here to
Yeah.
the in-bucket monitor. I get that email that came through.
Hmm.
I confirm the email
So
address. And
just
at this
to let you
stage,
know,
yeah,
um,
sorry.
based on so I did this in the course too. Like one of the things I recommend is actually turning off email validation locally, not at the production level. Like when you launch at production, you want to keep that off. But when you start up inside of the config.toml, there's a way to turn that off at the Supabase level. Yeah, you can turn off the confirm email, and that'll take you right to uh, like as soon as you
Yeah,
created an
but
account,
I
it
don't
was
want that
created. Yeah.
because
Why
that's
not?
not going to happen in production. And that freaks me out that they would automatically shift them there. I want to have the exact flow the user will be doing.
I see. Okay.
Yeah, for me that I did see that I could do that, but I don't want the convenience as a developer because then I will rely on that behavior. I
Yeah.
need to be able to say, hey, I'm waiting for validation. When I reload the page, it'll like, or go to another window, it'll be validated. I need to have that kind of working. I might be missing something. It might be just working super well under the hood, and
Yeah.
I'll figure it out. But
I
this is an
found it
example.
worked pretty well. But yeah, let's
Um,
keep going with what you're doing here.
So this is where I'm getting stuck on the test setup is
Mm-hmm.
that when it's a new account and you log in, I need more information
Mm-hmm.
because I need you to create a username. So you've validated your email. That's great, but I need you to have a username because of it. I just do. There's other
Yeah.
reasons as well. I also want to do stuff like the newsletter, and I think there'll be maybe some settings for like organization and things. There was things that I wanted up front that I didn't want to put into the login stage. I wanted that to be simple to just get them to try it, but I need this intermediate stage. If they already have an account and they've already created a username, then they don't. Uh, shit.
Supers. There we go.
Username is already taken. No, that was a slug. Uh, check slug was being delayed.
Gotcha.
Yeah, this is also still broken. But once they're logged in, it in the background has created the stuff needed. So they have the org, they have the universe, they have stuff
Okay. So
inside.
that's the
All
first
that
time you
works.
run through, right?
So that was the first time. So there's that intermediate screen. The second time I run through, um, it would be very similar. I would sign in. I would use, zack at supascript.com.
Uh-huh.
I would go to 5.4 here to click on the email. The new one has the login code. And then, okay, like I said, something is broken here, but it would take me right to here. That's the difference between the two. So in terms of Playwright,
Yeah.
how do I conditionally check in this global setup
Yeah.
which one I might be going to? And I don't know how to do that.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, there's a whole bunch of different ways you could do that, right? Like
Mhm.
by the time so you're going to so line after line 14, where are you? You've clicked
Yeah.
login.
Line 14 is right when I click the email login, and it will navigate to either way, it will navigate here,
Mm-hmm.
but in one case, it will stay here and ask me to fill in my username. And in
Mm-hmm.
the other case, it'll bounce me through to a unknown URL. Well, I guess I will know the URL slug. It's a little coupled. I basically just take the username and append universe, but it'll bounce me to this URL. I could hard code that. That's fine in the test.
Yeah.
But it's going to be
It's
one
going to
or
be
the other.
weird
So
with like the
yeah,
fact that it touches on that URL for a little bit and then goes to this one.
yeah, that's
Just
why I'm sort
because,
of like,
yeah, right now you're at like wait for navigation is going to be a little weird. I mean, you could
yeah.
throw in the wait there, like it's just a wait for a promise that's going to resolve in like however long it will be to make sure that you're at the right URL, and then just check like what URL you're at. You know,
Oh, so just throw in like a, three
I don't
second
love it,
thing.
but it'd
Yeah, yeah,
work.
that's true.
Like that, like any kind of that kind of scripting, I feel like is so easy in Playwright. But yeah, like the weirdness right now is just the fact that you touch on that URL because like line 19 is always going to happen,
Yeah.
versus like what happens if you just wait for navigation. I feel like they might
with
have
no
some debouncing built into that.
URL.
Yeah, with no URL.
Uh, okay, but even after that,
Mm-hmm.
I need to then potentially finish or see. Let me do this in a new user. We'll do an incognito window. We'll do a user.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I normally do test. Well, whatever. It doesn't matter. We're just gonna do one. So I would go here. I would click on this, and in this case, I need to do something and click, and then wait for navigation. In the other, I will just end up at the place where I need to navigate. So I have a conditional that happens like here, where I need to like, does this selector exist?
Yeah, exactly.
If so, add the username.
Mm-hmm.
And if either way, when that finishes, I would then save the storage. We've navigated successfully. We're done.
Yeah,
It's this.
you tried exactly this. You tried exactly what you want to write, I think, which is like I. So actually, instead of the selector, I would want to do it off the URL personally. But
By the way, Copilot still blows my mind.
yeah,
Um,
it's pretty nuts. But yeah, just in like an if statement, like starting on line
yeah,
20, like you
right.
can use this
Yeah.
exact block. If yeah, exactly. If page URL is equal to the account, like that means that we have to do an extra step.
Uh,
Slash account. Yeah.
yeah. So after that, wait. If page URL is account,
Mm-hmm.
isn't this? Oh no, it just checks it. You don't have to wait for that.
URL is not
Cool.
promise, I believe. So, but after you have resolved the promise on line 19, um, interesting that's a promise dot all, but you should just
Oh
be
well,
able to.
yeah, I think it was something else I was doing there previously, which I changed. Let me
Yeah. Yeah, but you could just like wait for the navigation, and once that promise resolves, then you could check the URL like you're doing here. And if the URL is account, then you could fill out the form, and then like wait for navigation again, or submit the form, and then wait for navigation again, uh, and then like yeah, you could do what you're doing on line 26 and 27. Looks like that's setting the cookie, I guess, or the JWT, and then yeah, I think that should be it.
Yeah, okay. One thing I really like about the new let me just do this. One thing I like about the new version of this test stuff is uh, you can like record at cursor,
Yeah,
so it'll run my test in a window up until that point, or it should do. I don't know if it's gonna work. um, like Yeah, maybe this isn't working because I'm inside the global setup. But in the other test, you can do it of like it'll run through the test up until there and wait for you.
yeah.
It's
One thing you could
freaking
do there
cool.
too, if you set a breakpoint, the
Yeah.
debugger will
I just think it's
trigger
a
out
little
that breakpoint.
different. I think it's a little different because I'm not inside a test. I'm inside the global setup.
Yeah,
And so it probably doesn't work the way it's expected.
yeah.
But
See,
that's
I don't
fine.
use the global
It's still
setup. I
pretty
just
cool.
have before eaches that I'll call inside each one of the tests. So
I
it's
mean,
doing the same
I
thing really, but
yeah, uh, it is, but I like having that where I don't have to run it before each test because that takes a little while and it clutters up the thing. And then, but you're doing it because you're clearing the users every time,
yeah,
right?
yeah. I'm clearing the
So
users every
if
time so that really I want to make it so that my development process is actually immutable. So like that
mm,
thing that you kind of balked at, which was oh well the user that you were playing with is going to be gone, or the user
mhm,
that you were like developing with is going to be gone. I
yeah,
actually want that because I feel like that's like okay, I'm in a mutatable state right now. I'm not sure if that this mutatable state is actually even possible, based
right.
just because of like whatever I've happened to do pulling the strings as the developer inside of this local environment. I do that specifically to keep myself accountable, to make sure, hey, I'm not doing anything uh, weird here that I'm not losing track of. It's actually all in the scripting that's happening inside of the playwright automation that has been put
Yeah.
in. So
I do get the concept, and it's probably just me being, I would
it's
like
I think
to.
both ways are completely valid. By the way, I'm not trying to dunk on
No,
the way
no,
you're doing it, but I
no,
like
but
that part about, I like the thing that you didn't like, right? So
no, and I can see why you would like that. But for me, the way that I code is very exploratory in nature, especially when I
mm,
get to a certain stage in the UI development. I'll
yeah,
be like, oh, what if I do this? And then I'll find the thing I need, and then I'll try and fix it. And then I might want to write a test for it. And then
hmm,
the test would like break the setup I had because I had created four other edge conditions that I hadn't
yeah.
written. So it'll slow me down. I guess that's really what it is.
I feel
It
that,
tends to slow me down.
and I definitely sympathize with the idea of like the exploratory coding. It's just
Mhm.
for me, I want to do that exploratory coding too, but I want to, when I get to something interesting, I want to make sure I can reliably return to that interesting thing. You see what I'm
Yeah,
saying? Like
sure, sure.
once I get to something, I'll explore, right? Like I'll just do a serve and then try to get to some point and see if I can break something there. But then once I've gotten to that point, I want to make sure when I write my test, I script through. Like Playwright is so amazing to me because it's literally like I can just script out the steps I just took
Yeah.
to get to that point, and then I always have like uh, written down, stored somewhere how I can get to that point, and then make sure that that always works the way I hope it to
Yeah.
in the future.
And probably my side is coming from a place of I don't normally do test-driven style development. I've
Mm,
never had a situation where I've had a test suite that is such a core part of my workflow. It's
yeah.
always an afterthought, right?
Hmm.
On this project, I've at least got the setup so that I could make that work.
Yeah.
And then on my one of my work projects where we're starting Greenfield, and I really, really want us to be doing this from day one to the
Hmm.
point where I have to train myself and my team members to be like, okay, you're building this feature, write it in the test form. Don't use your own browser really to do it at first. Like,
Yeah.
sure, for the UI and for making the designs look correct, do that. But as soon as you get down to functionality, I'm like, I have to do to dem how are you going to demo this to the client when you're done, right? You're going to
Yeah.
open the browser with it running, you're going to click here, you're going to log in or do whatever it is, and you're going to
Yeah.
open this and show the feature and set it. Write that as an end-to-end test,
Yes, exactly.
you know?
For
Yeah.
me, it's not just the demo. It's also just like, okay, if I wanted to test to make sure this feature was working, I would do
Yeah.
something, and I
Yeah.
would want it to actually
I would
be.
do it.
I would, yeah, I would actually
Hmm.
just like go through steps A, B, C to get to there, and like my limitations as a human is once that gets to A B C D E F G F H I whatever,
Hmm.
I'll invariably start forgetting some of those steps along the way, and so being able to write that down to code is actually just like making sure, oh, I actually took the same exact steps for my first run as I did my second run, but I got this different result. And that versus like if I am just developing by myself, by the time I get to the 10th step in there, I may have missed one. And
Hmm.
that just confuses everything so much more. So being able to script those things out, so have a machine do all those tricky events, or keeping track of all that stuff for me that my brain's not really good at. That's kind of what I try to use it for. So
I think that's really wise. And I've switched over to so many of your ways of doing things over time. I'll probably do this one too.
well, give it a
Um,
try. I don't want
yeah.
to like if things work, I don't want to be overriding them. But I've really enjoyed being able to have that workflow when it's possible. And a lot of things it's just not possible because you're coming into projects that have been around for a long time,
Yeah.
and things just don't work that way. But
Yeah, for sure.
it feels like they
It's
should
been,
to
it
me.
does. I'm changing this now. By the way, I really like my code base.
Yeah.
So Angular wise, I really still enjoy Angular. I don't,
Mm.
people can hate on it all they want. I think it's great. But Tailwind, people can hate on Tailwind all they want. I also
I
think
love
it's great.
Tailwind. Anyone who's hating on Tailwind, I think is just crazy.
I think they just don't understand what it is.
Yeah.
I think it's great. I love it. I was looking at this file and being like, look, that text green, that's my green. That's not just some random green. That's like my custom defined green that I have. And if I change it to like players,
Yeah.
that's my yellow. That is the custom yellow. That's so cool that that's there. And also, I'm using Transloco for my translations now, which
Yeah.
aren't in there yet, but you are able to like switch to Spanish, and nothing happens because I haven't done any Spanish translations recently. But you will eventually be able to.
Still cool.
Oh yeah, campañas. Haha, it's there.
Campañas.
Uh-huh. Yeah, I'm changing this around to see if I can get this working. I just changed the.
Internationalization done.
Yeah, no kidding. The one problem is this selector is translated the ARIA labels because it's
Mm.
for screen readers too.
Yeah.
But that's what I'm using as the most precise selector I can have. How do you do selectors? Do you use some sort of like data test
Yeah.
sort of thing?
If you so the data star is actually kind of interesting if you ever want to look it up on MDM. It
Yeah.
actually builds when you use a data star attribute. The data that you put into there actually is put into the DOM. So like everything you need for like a framework is kind of built in. Try data dash star attribute, or maybe just data dash star MDM. Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, but
Oh, this is
it just
W
means
three.
data
Get out of
dash.
W three.
Oh yeah, you're
W
right.
three is
Sorry.
terrible.
I need to get that plugin for it.
Just go to
That
the.
just that
There should be
redirects you.
like a MDM doc
Yeah, yeah.
specifically for data star. But yeah,
Well, then
yeah, anything like
it's
that
close
is
enough.
actually like if you look at the element now after you use the
Hmm.
data star attribute, it's on that information is on the element, and you can script
Oh,
with
like
it.
the document element.
Yeah, yeah.
Like, yeah, okay. Yeah,
Now
I'm
you don't
sure I'm
really use
actually
that
making use of
when you're
that.
writing tests, but you could. So I always do that. I,
Good.
I always use like data E to E for if I want to have like a specific selector I want to test on. So.
Mm.
And
Yeah, I
sometimes I
do.
put in information to that too that I actually care about. But inevitably, when I look for it, I don't actually use the fact that the information is on the element. I just look for
Right.
like it inside of the string of the attribute. So
Yeah. I, I, I'm hesitant to add additional stuff specifically for end-to-end tests to my code. I would love a way that that could be like stripped out during the compilation phase.
yeah, that would be
Um,
nice. But
yeah.
and like the alternative is just like there is part of me that doesn't like it too because when I am scripting those things out, using a data ETE selector actually feels like cheating a little bit because the
Mm.
interface I always want to be focused on when I'm writing those tests is what does the user see. Like this is all completely user driven, and the user has no idea, right? Like what's going on, or I mean, I guess they could if they were inspecting the DOM themselves, but I don't want them to. I want their experience to be uh, just like, well, what do I see? I see a login button. So, okay, I'm going to script out clicking the button with text login. That makes sense to me. But doing something like I want to click on, I don't know, something else that's more interesting, that always gets weird.
Hmm.
Because yeah, you can build in like I think I do this with Supership. Like the post ID is actually there in the DOM for me to do stuff with, and I could write tests that's like, okay, hit the reply button for post at this ID. Like that's
Hmm.
that's a utility I have, but I almost like worry about using it sometimes because the user doesn't know what the idea is. I guess the idea
Yeah.
is maybe like, well, the user knows what post they want to click on to reply, and
Yeah.
the idea is just my way of translating that intent from the user to make it work. So, I'm okay with that.
Okay, I'm going to run this test. Let's
Nice.
find out what happens.
This is testing out the global setup, really.
Uh-huh. To see if it finishes.
Yeah.
Uh, I have this show browser, but it doesn't always work running tests. Like sometimes it'll just hang, and I don't know why.
Yeah, like I don't know for that the global setup because that may not run inside of like the, like I don't know where that runs in terms of the life cycles of Playwright.
Yeah, it does its own window first, so it generates that object. Oh, I hate when node modules are open. Uh,
Yeah.
Somewhere here. Yeah, okay. What broke? It couldn't find 5432. Like it couldn't find this element.
Mm-hmm. Couldn't find the login to click on.
Yeah, yeah, interesting. Maybe it changed the text. Who knows?
Yeah.
Okay, I won't stick with that any longer. But yeah, what it does is it runs that and it generates a particular output file if it does succeed.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and that storage, where is it called? This playwright storage.json.
Yeah.
And then that basically all it does is it goes into the window once it's finished, and it goes into this local storage object, and it grabs all of this stuff and puts it in there.
Nice. So it's just like
Yeah,
pre-populating stuff for you. Yeah. I mean,
yeah,
if it works, it
yeah,
works.
exactly. It's just like, well, as long as I'm not committing that file and it has weird auth tokens and stuff, I mean, it works.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Sweet, dude. I hear my kiddos up and moving about,
nice.
so I should probably head out here pretty soon. But yeah, this was fun. Thanks
Yeah,
for coming on and uh, humoring my streaming impulse these days, Evan. That was fun.
yeah, it's all good. Really happy to see how things are going for you, and I have in a tab open your course as well to
Woo!
make sure I'm doing my super base stuff correctly.
Hey, that's awesome. I hope it's helpful to you. And we've had a lot of people with the course get the course recently. So far heard all good things. I do
Good.
actually want to add some modules here, or some extra lessons specifically on triggers and functions.
Nice.
Um, just because I felt like we kind of hand waved over that a little bit in the course. So I'd like to rectify that. So
Yeah, I think that hook you mentioned earlier is pretty powerful. Of if it goes wrong,
hmm
it can just kind of not have happened, and you don't
yes,
have to correct yourself if you have a multi-stage flow happening. That's really nice, actually,
yeah,
um, and maybe
yeah,
worth
and
stuff
th-
there.
that stuff too. I mean, this is what makes me want to get into Postgres so much, because that's just like a core part of what Postgres is.
Yeah,
Between like functions and triggers and all these things, all those things are batched into transactions, and like the way it does it is like with this write ahead log is what you call it. And so it's easy to back those things out. It's like
yeah,
you're staging together what the next state of the database is going to be, and until you commit that stage change to the database, like it doesn't actually happen, but
yeah.
it does in the context of the transaction you're working on. So
Right.
I really want to
Really
understand
neat.
too just how the blocking with all that stuff works too, because I
Yeah.
don't have a good understanding. Because they must be doing something where, like, say you had like a sequential ID, but
Right.
and two people are trying to add
Right.
something, but there's transactions in place. They must be doing some blocking off of
Yeah.
that to make sure there's no conflict. But yeah, I'm not sure. Really interesting stuff. I want to
Interesting
understand
stuff.
better. But yeah,
Yeah.
thanks again, Evan. I'll wrap up the stream here. Thanks y'all for joining. We had a good amount of people, I feel like, show up.
Cool.
I was pleased. So
Awesome.
yeah,
Well, thanks for having me. We'll talk again soon.
sounds great. All right, see y'all.
Ciao.